Okay, day 27. Man, I was reading in this book that I got. So, I think I showed before Hitmakers, the art. Well, it used to be the Science of Popularity, and now he changed it with his new edition, How to Succeed in an Age of Distraction. But man, it is so good. This section that I started reading, it's just like right in the beginning. During the Impressionist era, there was this painter who was very little known named Gustave Caillebotte. And when he first started painting, he started painting in this impressionist style, and all of these other artists, and we're live. Okay, so all these other artists like rejected this, like this is atrocious. And he started painting in his 20s, I guess. And let's see. He submitted this painting in 1875, The Floor Scrapers, and it showed a white light coming through a window, illuminating the bare backs of white men, or white backs of several men working on their knees, scraping the dark floor of an empty room as the skin wood curls into spirals beside their legs. The painting was rejected, and there's a critic that summed up a lot of like the scornful responses, saying, "Do nudes, but beautiful nudes, or don't do them at all." However, some of the impressionists at the time disagreed, including Auguste Renoir, and he invited him to have like his art in some exhibits. And there were some other controversial young artists like Monet and Degas, and a lot of people didn't care for this impression art. It was way different than the current style, and so people were basically shitting on them. And so, but like they were like counterculture artists. He ended up dying early, but he became friends with these guys, and he created a collection. He bought this collection of art from some of these impressionist artists, and he wanted that collection to be put in one of the French museums. And then let's see, he finally, like so then like the French elite, like conservative critics and politicians, it says they're like, that's presumptuous. Like, who does this guy think he is that we're gonna hang these blotchy atrocities? Because impressionist art looks kind of blotchy, which is funny. Well, why would we accept this? So one of the things I thought was really interesting was it says, for the government to accept such filth, there would be a great moral slackening. But then the author here says, but what is the history of art if not one great slackening after another? And that's one of the things I really enjoy, or like the ideas is, there's a lot of times you in the history of art, in the history of music, in the history of cinema, there's these pivotal moments where a new player comes in the field and they create something new outside the box. And at the time, people, like the current establishment is like, this is disgusting, this isn't art, this is atrocious, this is blah, 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 blah. And then that comes to define a new generation and a new style. Think of... oh fuck, I'm gonna forget his name. What's the guy who does Pulp Fiction and Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? I'll think of his name, you know it. But when he first came out with Reservoir Dogs, and he's just, he has this specific violent style, like nobody was doing that. And so it was rejected. People didn't want to show it. People didn't, say that they couldn't release it. And he that's why he was directing his own stuff. And I forget exactly how he released it, but then it became so successful. Now he's one of the most successful directors out there, and he has a unique style. And he was outside the norm, and he was changing things up. So that's a lesson for me, just in the idea that like I don't have to make shit that agrees with the common accepted norm. It's like if you want to create something that's different, that's unique, like it's okay if other people shit on it. It's okay. Like it's art is art, and it's all subjective. And then, so I really like that. And then, so he finally, Renoir, who was the guy who knew him, he persuaded the government to accept about a half of this collection. And by one count, the accepted paintings include 8 works by Monet, Degas. So there's Monet, Degas, Pissarro, Renoir, Sisley, Manet, and Cezanne. Probably butchering all these French names. So when they hung these new exhibits in Luxembourg, it was the first exhibition of Impressionist art in France. But then like everybody was, so now all these people that were shitting on it, now people were coming in and seeing these and becoming familiar with these pieces. And so it was, as they call this collection of artists, the Calabati Seven, because he was the one who pushed for those specific artists who were really like little known artists, counterculture artists in the Impressionism movement. He pushed to have this collection put out, and then when it became very popular, and so it was all because of him that the Impressionism movement gained such popularity. So what was crazy is it was like 100 years after his death that there's this guy, James Cutting, that was standing in front of one of these paintings. Like, why is this thing so famous after all? Like, why did these guys get famous? And the one he was looking at was Renoir. And so he was like, let's see. It wasn't like any better than some of the other Impressionism. So it's like, why is this one? And then he had this aha moment that he realized that Calabati had owned not only that painting, but other many famous paintings in that museum. So he went and like looked through, and then he concluded that that tight cluster of 7 core painters were all owned by that Calabati guy. So he realized that like he was able to influence the entire genre of Impressionism by putting this out. So let's see. So people prefer paintings that they have seen before. So what happens is once they see these paintings, like then they start preferring them. So it's like the overexposure of something then allows somebody to prefer that painting. So he had another theory. What he said was the fact that Calabati's bequest shaped the Impressionism canon spoke to something deep and universal about media, entertainment, and popularity. People prefer paintings they've seen before. Audience like art that gives them the jolt of meaning that often comes from the inkling of recognition. So he was a professor at Cornell. So he gathered 166 people from his psychology class and presented them with a pair of works of Impressionist art. In each pair, one of the paintings was significantly more famous, more likely to appear in Cornell's university textbooks, and then one is less. So 6 times out of 10, students said they preferred the more famous picture. So this could have meant the famous paintings are better, or it could mean that Cornell students preferred canonical, I don't know how to say that word, canonical artworks because they were familiar with those paintings. So to prove the latter, Cutting had to engineer an environment where students were unwittingly but repeatedly exposed to less famous paintings, the same way the art students are unwittingly but repeatedly exposed to the Impressionist canon from a young age. What came next was quite clever. In a separate psychology class, Cutting bombarded students with obscure artworks from the late 19th century. The students in the second class saw a non-famous Impressionist painting 4 times for every time they glimpsed a famous artwork. This was Cutting's attempt to reconstruct a parallel universe of art history where Calabade never died prematurely, where his legendary bequests never created an impressionist wing, and where Calabade 7 never benefited from a random historical accident that elevated their exposure and popularity. So at the end of the second course, Cutting asked the 151 students to choose their favorite paintings among 51 pairs. The results of the popularity contest turned the canon upside down. In 41 of 51 pairs, the students' preference for the most famous Impressionist works disappeared. The emerald magnetism of Monet's gardens, the electric polychrome of Renoir, the genius of Monet were nearly nullified by something else, which was the power of the repeated exposure, which was of those lesser-known paintings that he overexposed them to. So it's extraordinary that Calabade's bequest helped to shape the canon of Impressionism because he purposely bought his friends' least popular paintings. Calabade made it a principle to buy especially the works of friends which seemed particularly unsellable. For example, Calabade served as a buyer of last resort when he purchased Renoir's Bal du Moulin de la Gatte. Today, that painting that Calabade rescued from obscurity, so nobody even wanted this, that inspired Cutting's famous study of art psychology, is considered a masterpiece. When it sold at an auction for $78 million in 1990, it was the second most expensive artwork ever purchased. Oh my God. So that's just so crazy. Like these ones were so unpopular that he rescued them, and now that's like become one of the like most successful artworks ever sold. Dude, this book is so good, first off, but I'm just blown away by how he was able to discover all this, first off, and to see that, like, you know, with the power of repetition, you're able to, like, people prefer that thing over something obscure because it like hits you different. You're like, oh, what is that? I don't know if I like that. Versus something that has the same kind of familiarity that something else you're used to. You're like, oh yeah, I like that. I've seen that before. It feels comfortable. It feels familiar. I know that he's going to, later in the book, because I've read it before, get into also why you need some newness as well, which I think that Impressionism had a sense of newness as well. Yeah, man, it's really interesting to think about why you gravitate towards some things, and I like that this author, Derek Thompson, is kind of laying the groundwork for some of the ways to think about what you're creating. So me personally, I want to take some of these principles and try to use it as I start to write some music and put out some art. I guess you could probably use it in other art forms too. I know he talks about movies and cinema. He talks about architecture and design, and like, so how a certain architects, I know he talks about it later in the book, but architects mimic like the shape of a human body or a particular part of a human body or the shape of a mountain or like things that we're already used to. So then they create that in their architecture, and you're drawn to that because you're already familiar with those shapes and those lines being drawn. So yeah, I think that's really cool insight. I don't know, I fucking love this book. If you're at all a creative, I would highly recommend checking it out. Yeah, anyway, we last night I had brought this is my last day in Vegas. I gotta fly out in a couple hours, but I had brought I think it was $400 to gamble with. And so I just bring cash, so that way I'm not going to spend any more. I actually brought $500, but then I spent $100 on mountain biking. So I'm only gambling with $400, and had been like up and down the first night, ended up going down a bit. I think I had like $200 left. And then yesterday we did some more gambling. And then in between like half times we were watching the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills play. And so then at halftime, we went and gambled some more, and I spent another $80 playing craps, one of my favorite games. Lost that. I was like, God damn it. Then we watched the rest of the game, and then I'm like, fuck, I have like $130 left in cash. And so I was like, David, fuck it, I want to gamble some more. Spent $100 at the. Oh, we don't need that. So played with another $100 at the craps table, and Severo played with me as well. I was teaching him how to play, and then we both just went up and up and up. So I ended up getting up above 300, and so then when I cashed out and counted all my cash, I was up to like 330. So I really only spent $70 on gambling this trip, so I'm pretty excited about that. And then we came home and did a podcast, which was cool, and then chilled. So yeah, it's an overall really good trip. Being sober is interesting in Vegas, but we had a lot of fun, and still trying to get all these things done with 75 hard and like my commitments to myself. So I got one of my workouts in. Probably do the other ones when I get home. Got to get packed up here, but it'll be good to get back in my own bed. Sleeping on an air mattress for a few days isn't always the best, but it's okay for a while, but it gets kind of old, and getting into a mattress would be really nice. So, but yeah, if Severo watches this, thank you so much for your hospitality. I love our friendship, and love that we're doing the dry January together. And yeah, we're going to keep moving forward. So anyway, I got to run, get packed, and I will check in tomorrow. Peace. End stream.